you've seen a little bit of it. What do you think about what's going on?
Well, it's upsetting because, I mean, obviously everybody's upset. The problem is I don't know what it's going to accomplish. If there was something going on where people were upset and concerned about what's going on, they were doing something that might make the situation better or solve the problem, then I'd be right there with you.
I guess I'm personally not upset. I actually think that the reason that I'm here is because we have tried through a couple of different methods, just getting in contact through student council, through individual meetings with the board, or the president and also the chairman of the board, and it hasn't accomplished anything, and it hasn't, we haven't really felt like, or I have not felt like the students have really been able to communicate to them in those environments how the majority of the student body feels. And I'm here because I think that this is actually the best way to address what's going on right now is why do we need someone who is in the president's office, who is supposed to be doing the president's job, and who's obviously not doing it and not able to do it, and we are giving him a chance to step down and actually not have all this pressure on him.
And so far he actually hasn't addressed us directly, only through the emergency management team. Mark sent an email when it started, and I was in a meeting with Mark that he left through the back door here. And Jamshed was supposed to be in the meeting, but he skipped out. That was the morning that people came in. So I've had a lot of opportunities, because I'm also on the student council, Casey, to meet with Jamshed and Mark and in an official capacity. And I don't find, and also in the larger forums, and I haven't found them to be effective. I feel manipulated and ignored and steamrolled. And so then, even when we do something, this rash, literally taking over the space, there's no direct address from Jamshed, which is disappointing.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the problem is that everybody's very unhappy. And the fact is that I'm in the same boat. I don't know anybody who's happy. Everybody's unhappy about what's going on. The problem is, how do you solve it? Now, there's been a forum, we've all talked about what the issues were. It's hard to solve a problem that there is no solution. Now, yeah, you can go back and say, well, you shouldn't have done that 20 years ago, you shouldn't have. It doesn't help the current situation. That's the frustration. Because I'll try to tell you what the feeling is on the board. The problem started 20 years ago with the Chrysler Building revenue, which had gone up for 50 years in a row, and we counted on, because the Chrysler Building really funds the school. It suddenly turned down. The owner was Jack Henry Cook, who also owned the Washington Redskins. He fell on hard times and stopped investing in the building. Meanwhile, the New York City real estate market turned down. So the value of the building dropped, which meant the assessed value dropped, their tax equivalency dropped. So what needed to be done at that point in time was to bring the costs down to match the fact that for 10 years there was a decline. It wasn't until the early 2000s that it caught up to where it was in 1990. So the reason a lot of things weren't done, because there were two basic solutions, and nobody liked either one of them. Because one was to charge tuition, which nobody ever wanted to do. All the years of selling off Green Camp and selling off pieces of property was to defer the problem. Nobody wanted to confront and deal with the problem. Tuition was one. The other is to shrink the school significantly so you could get your costs in line with the new lower revenue. Nobody wanted to do that. I've worked with 3 presidents, Vizelin, Campbell, now Larucha, and none of them wanted to do either of those things. So what we hope is that if you keep pushing things off, maybe something great will happen. Maybe Bloomberg will give us $500 million. When we decided to build the building, the hope was the building will generate a lot of excitement, people will give us tons of money, and when we find out we got a great architect like Tom Main, money come pour again, we never did. The money didn't come in. We we were very disappointed in what we raised from building the building. So we said, well, you shouldn't have built the building. Well, but if the building had produced several $100 million, everybody said, well, that was a great idea. It really helped us out. So if you look backwards and say, would you do it today? You had it to do over again. If I knew what the outcome was going to be, I'd say maybe not, because it took a lot of time and attention. That's my biggest concern about the building, is that it had the focus of the president and the board almost 10 years. A lot of energy and time went into building that building. And maybe we could have been doing other things. Maybe working harder to raise money outside and, you know, maybe changing the restructuring the school somewhat. So that's the frustration, is that on hindsight, you're looking to say, well, maybe things should have been different or could have been different. But
Or they can start to be different.
Yeah,
Well,
I think that's the key.
That's-
Like we're actually
Yeah.
in this moment and looking forward. What are the actual steps that we can take?
Well, the reality is, the only other choice that we've had other than tuition was to restructure the school, reduce the cost structure. You know, it's a fun when you have a deficit. It's a simple problem. You're spending more money than you're making. You know, it's like if you buy a nice house, you buy a nice car, and you realize you can't pay for it. So you go into your boss and you say, I need another $50,000 a year because I just can't pay for everything. Well, it doesn't work that way. The first thing you have to do is try to get your costs in line. That for a place like Cooper, that doesn't have a lot of money lying around, we don't have a lot of amenities, it's not so easy to do. You start cutting costs, you're cutting to the bone of the school. We talk about closing the school, nobody wants to do that. We talk about restructuring engineering, maybe eliminating a couple of degree programs. Nobody really wanted to do that either. Everybody wants Cooper Union the way Cooper Union's always been.
There should be a
And many of the trustees are included. We don't know what are the changes we can make. Now, if people have ideas for what we can do, we hear, well, there's bloat, you know, there's too much administrative. Well, some of the things you really can't control. For example, benefits. Benefits paid to faculty, staff, medical benefits, whatever, they're almost $10 million a year. It's almost 20% of the operating budget. Well, you have to get people to give up some of those things, and nobody's going to do that. So we looked at a lot of other alternatives of how we could cut costs that wouldn't be that painful and people would support.
I'm sorry,
We couldn't find enough.
excuse me, but the way you're framing it is the same way all of these discussions have gone, and this conversation is not changing at all. And what we're actually looking for is for this conversation to create new frames in which we can re-envision a way in which Cooper Union can follow its mission from that it has done for 150 years. We want to get it back on track. To do that, and in order to do that, we have to mobilize the whole community. And that's why we're here. We're taking reins again so that people can mobilize and help us out and come as a community together. But as long as you continue doing things that the Cooper Union does not stand for, you will continue losing all your financial support from the community, and all the decisions that you can make will be the ones you're talking about.
Right.
Because there are any other choices, but there are other choices. That's what we're here to prove to you, that there are other choices, but you have to look outside of that frame that you've been thinking about. You have to look at why we have an overpaid president, why we have an overpaid administration. We have to look at who would do the job that doesn't that wouldn't be overpaid, who would mobilize the whole community, and why is the whole board telling me the same story you're telling me? I mean, you have to look inside. If you actually believe in this institution and you want to bring it forward and you want to lead us out of here, you have to start questioning why you're framing this way in such an impossible way.
Right. Well, but because what you're saying is you don't like the answers you're getting, and what I'm
It's not
saying
about
is
like, it's about seeing beyond it. It's about seeing beyond it. It's not about liking or disliking or
well,
like,
then come up with, are there constraints? You said go outside the community, rally the community.
But
The other
Nobody's
way that
opposed
you're
to
framing
that.
it is that you say we had no other choice but this or that. And I mean, all the people here literally sitting in the administrative office, I think is making the point that the community is not involved in these decisions and doesn't understand why it falls to an unpaid volunteer board of trustees that are unimpeachable and an administration that has told us that they contractually cannot support the mission of the school right now.
We had 2 years of deliberation with the faculty submitting very eloquent proposals to the board, and a lot of nuanced debate about what the school could do. And we got an announcement on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock or something, that at 6 o'clock, that in a few hours, the 150-year mission of this school was going to be left behind in a very, I mean, if you had given the speech, it would have been something more than Mark Epstein getting up there with not a bit of shame, not a bit of sense, the guy, no decorum, no class. I mean, you really start here standing with
almost
us.
proud to say that.
As long as he's the face of board decision making, the board will be contemptible.
Almost spiteful, and the decision was 50% across the board. After 2 years of deliberation, some of the best minds around, the best we could come up with was 50% across the board. I mean, that's really something to question, no?
I think one of the things that a lot of people, or at least I find really confusing and upsetting, is that, especially on the issue of cost cutting, is that the board can't go line by line and look at the budget. The board doesn't have the knowledge of the school and how it works to be able to do a true analysis of what can be cut. The cost reduction, revenue reduction, cost reduction, whatever, the task force that was supposed to find stuff that could be cut found 20% possible cuts, and that committee was made up of full-time faculty from all the way to schools, or at least full-time faculty from 3 of the faculty who's in the architecture, I don't know who was on it, and administrators. They identified 20%, and yet we're given an artificial cap of 12%. Why was that 20% not fully taken up before the decision to charge tuition? It doesn't make sense. The fact is that the board doesn't have an intimate knowledge enough of how the school works to be able to make these decisions without having a more close conversation with faculty, students, and that's one of our biggest problems is communication.
Well, I met with financial people, went through the costs line by line to see what the cuts were, and I came up with quite a few. The problem was, it wasn't enough.
Financial people on the board, or?
No, financial people in the school. Because I agree with you. And it normally isn't the role of the board to do that. But in this kind of a situation where it's such a crisis and such an important decision that has to be made, I think the board does have to step up. You can't be detached and just, sit back and take whatever you hear at face value and act on it. The problem was I couldn't find, I found quite a few costs that we cut. Now you can argue all day long about what is essential and what isn't. I think you can cut over here and somebody says, no, you can't do that, that's important. One of the big increases, we'd say, well, the administration is overblown.
Yeah.
Well, I went back and looked at headcount over the years. The headcount hasn't changed much. It's not like we've staffed up. One of the big additions occurred relatively recently in development. We're spending a hell of a lot more money in development than we used to spend, probably $2 million more. And so the question is that a justified
But
expense?
at the same time, you're isolating the people that development office is supposed to develop programs with. You know what I mean? To generate money with. So you're actually denying yourself even the opportunity to be successful with that investment. All these investments you're making are being negated by your isolation of the community. This community will support the school as long as you open up that frame the way you keep framing the school, you need to open it up.
When you say this community, who are you talking about?
I'm speaking about the alumni, I'm speaking about everyone
Faculty,
else around the
staff,
city, and if you want
students.
proof, just look around every day. We have people from all over the city
The
come
proof is on
here.
its desk, but can I ask about the email that was sent out, like the unanimous support of the president by the board? And have you looked at the petition of the vote of no confidence that's now signed by
nearly
I don't know how
400 people.
More than 400, and then another
There's an
700
online petition
from
and
alumni.
Well, but the overall confidence and the unhappiness with the president is a function of the outcome of what's going on.
It's
No.
not
Not just that, not just that.
I'm just
we're
talking
also
about.
unhappy with his leadership.
Well, all I'm saying is that it's that
Exactly.
what that calls. That is a vote of no confidence. We have no confidence, and we're here like we want him to step down, and we have no like recourse for that because you're the only ones who can do anything, and you guys are like who? I'm just like what are your how? I don't. There's like 700. That's so many signatures.
Well, I urge you to read the document, and if you need more than that, I'm happy to go ahead and provide additional video clips of instances that we've had interactions. I think I really do appreciate and respect you for coming here and
Yeah.
talking with us like this, because I will be honest with you, I think the stopgap is Mark and Jamshed. The way that they interact with the community is one that's based on marginalization and ridicule, and I'll tell you that they made me cry after the tuition announcement, not because of tuition, but because they were ridiculing me, because they were shaking their hands in my face, because they were gesturing at me, because they were approaching me further, and I'm not one to be emotional like that, but it was an interaction that I have never received from someone who is supposed to be
A leader.
a leader.
And also
But I'm a leader in my own right, and Mauricio was there, and Joe was there.
the liaison with the Board of Trustees is someone who instigates the students to even do things like that. The way he speaks to me, the way he speaks to a lot of these
Well, he
students,
laughs in
Lawrence
our face.
Cacciatore,
I mean,
he's really-
So I'm saying, I'd urge you, we have videos of that, to review that, because I think like the way you're able to have this communication is exactly the kind of things that we were proposing to Jamshed. Those suggestions that I made, he laughed at.
But
We were
I
in an
just-
empty room. He laughed at my face.
Well, I'm not going to defend that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, could we just quickly my question about the petition, like how many signatures on that would it take for the board to no longer support Jamshed?
It's not, that's not how it comes down. The board has to decide whether or not he's doing the job he was hired to do. And if he's not doing the job, it's not a petition, it's the judgment of the board. One of the things I feel, frankly, badly for him is that he did not know of the magnitude of the issues when he came here. John's a very accomplished educator. He ran 7 or 8 schools at Tufts. He's not a guy who's ever had a major financial crisis to deal with.
And that's why he's not fit to do this. We're not saying he's a bad person. I'm urging
Well,
you to read our
that
statement.
also was the
We're
job-
saying that he's unfit to lead in that capacity. And if this is the case, and we are in this deficit and we have this burden, then we should go find someone who has more experience in that route and who we can speak to. I mean, again, I think a lot of
He's an
this is in our
effective
statement, but
communicator.
this is
Yeah.
we're not. Again, this is not to crucify him. This is we are seeing over this past few years that this is not. We can see very clearly this is not the path to get from point A to point B.
Well, it's hard to argue what you're saying. The issue comes down to whether the board in total feels that if we did do a dramatic cost reduction, that it would solve the problem and we would be better off taking that approach than tuition. And that was the gist of the argument for all this time, because there are those of us who felt that tuition was never going to be an answer, and those who felt that cutting the cost, you would never be able to keep Cooper the way it is by to cut as drastically as you would have to, and that would create all kinds of issues within the school. You might have strikes by the faculty, you could have problems with the National Labor Relations Board. It's the old story when you have two choices and nobody really likes either one of them.
But I think the faculty always made it really clear, and the faculty that are unionized always made it clear that many have wrote specifically about the issue that you're saying, that they would be willing to make the cuts, or to at least address those cuts. I mean, it's not a case where they would have wanted you to come in and just announce it, but if there was actually an open dialogue around that, I think many staff agreed that they were more willing to comply with the idea of cuts than the idea of tuition.
Well,
and that's only part of it.
And there has been many conversations among students and faculty and staff about what living within the means of a tighter budget would mean for the school. And I think there are very, very real suggestions and ways to do that. But the fact is that those suggestions and those plans like can never make it to the board.
They've been
Because
marginalized by the
they've been-
president.
Because we've been told to essentially be quiet about
But I think,
it.
again, that's a stopgap. I'm saying you're here. I'm saying I
But
think
you're
you should really consider who is the stopgap between us having this dialogue with you, because there are people, and I could name 3 that we already have named, that are preventing you from having heard this, because we've been saying the same thing for years.
And a concrete example of that would be the arts faculty, who released a statement saying that they don't support reinvention and that they're actually willing to work to reimagine what Cooper could be within its means, and they started having these planning meetings, and they were essentially threatened. They had a class deferred from the top. The early admissions were canceled.
Do I know that?
Yeah, and then as a top-down decision that shocked a lot of them. And they, as far as I understand, were essentially threatened that the school would be closed if they didn't submit reinvention plans,
Well, because
which they deemed a coercive process.
well, the president asked all the schools to come up with ideas, just like you're talking about. What else could we do to maybe improve Cooper and get the costs under control? And the engineering school came up with a plan, and the architecture school came up. The art school did too, and then suddenly rescinded it at the very last minute. They said, we are no longer going to back up that plan. So,
But did you see why they said that? Because they also gave an explanation as to why, and they said that they understood that that those plans would actually be more detrimental in the long run and had no potential to fulfill the deficit or bring in appreciable amounts of money. So it's not that they didn't withhold them from you.
It was a blank check for the board to, and the
But they didn't
president to do
withhold
whatever
the
they
plans. They
want.
actually had them. They just said we cannot back them. They are here. These are the plans. We just cannot say that we feel strongly about them.
But
so they
most
didn't
of-
have any plan that they did have confidence would be helpful to the school.
But in the same way that you mentioned that in this time of need, the board has had to move out of the space of what a board would normally do, it is not typical for any faculty to have to come up with these types of revenue-generating models while they have to also teach, while they have to do all this other stuff. And the very short amount of time that they had to do that, which was about a month, which was like started during the summer, was potentially not enough time for them to be also planning their course loads, talking to us. They didn't want to betray us in making those plans, and perhaps if they had had a little bit longer, if it had been, again, like Mauricio was saying, framed differently, they could have come up with a plan. And I just don't think that it was clearly conveyed to them that in the absence of a plan, some action would be taken, like deferring the incoming class. I'm a tour guide, and I go to all of the admissions open houses, and none of those parents and none of those children were told that that was ever going to be on the spectrum of options for those kids that were applying. They were told that that incoming class was not going to have any effect. So they went about, especially the kids that are early decision, those are the cream of the crop, and they went about spending their time, spending their money on the application, not applying to other schools, with the intention, even knowing the financial situation, because we were talking to them, wanting to come here, and then they had this whole thing that happened to them. So it's, that was never conveyed that that would be something that could happen.
Well, the argument on the side is that who better to redefine or reinvent the art school than the art faculty? You could bring in a consultant, which everybody says, why the hell do you spend money on consultants that you can't afford? Who is to do that? To Baruch's credit, he wouldn't do anything without the input of the faculty.
Excuse me, but then why? It makes it very simple. He asked for them to propose a plan and
To generate revenue.
to generate revenue.
For revenue-generating programs.
And then once they did it, once they were forced to do it because a class was compromised, he then instituted tuition. In other words, he said, "Work with me here." They were forced to work they wanted to work in their own terms. He didn't let them work in their own terms. And after that, after forcing them to work together, he said, "Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm going to do what you never wanted to do, which is charge tuition." How do you suggest we trust any administration when they bamboozle us like that?
Well, because the answer was that of the two alternatives, it was the better one that the board considered. Doesn't mean there isn't another solution somewhere. Like I said, if somebody gives you a ton of money or community comes together and does something. But
there is a way there must be a way to lead that. That has to come from the administration. Why? Okay, this is the last question I'll ask. Why didn't you ever have a capital campaign to raise money for the mission? Why did you have to have a building? Or why don't you imagine that we as a collective Cooper Union are already a physical presence enough, a body for 150 years to rally people around, to have people back them up.
Well, because the history and experience of capital campaigns is you have a reasonable chance to raise a significant amount of money if you give people naming opportunities. You have bricks and mortar, they can put their name on a laboratory, on a classroom. That is traditionally the most effective way to raise money. If you're raising money for scholarships for the kids to adapt, you could do that. We've been trying for 100 years to generate.
I'm sorry, but Peter Cooper introduced the conversation of philanthropy in New York City. Why can't we reintroduce it in a new way rather than what you're saying is the only way to do philanthropy?
No, because we have. You don't think we've talked to people who have the capacity to give Cooper significant amounts of money? I've done fundraising for 40 years for the school, and you run into a couple of problems. Most wealthy New York philanthropists give tremendous amounts of money to the Metropolitan Museum, to MoMA, to Sloan Kettering Hospital. Those institutions have prestige in the city. When you start talking about a college that they didn't go to, it is extremely difficult to get people to give a big chunk of money to a school, no matter what your mission is.
Because I haven't seen one effort to get the things that would give this school prestige outside of being just a school from the administration. The administration has not spent one dime in getting out there the fact that the Cooper Union is the Cooper Union in this building embodies the beginning of everything you see out there in New York City. It is the beginning of why the city became great in the first place, and in the 70s, why the economy rised again.
Have you read Felix Salmon's Reuters article, The Tragedy of Cooper Union?
Yeah, I just read it last night.
I was just wondering if you had a comment, because a lot of these discussions come down to real estate. Right. And one thing he says in that article is that, weirdly enough, growth is inimical to longevity. And the traditional approach to fundraising you're talking about, by building a building, which I looked at the promotional materials, and it was to preserve the mission of free education, it flopped. And what I'm seeing from this administration and board still is an approach that a way to raise, to sustain the institution and raise money is still through growth. So I've already seen that approach fail.
What do you mean by growth?
What the gentleman says in the article precisely is that there is a traditional way to make a capital campaign around a new piece of infrastructure for a college, but that is precisely not what Cooper did, because Cooper did not find a donor before they started the process of building the building. You know, that every consultant that has been asked about this process that Cooper underwent cannot explain why the administration made the decision to build the thing before they had the donor that would put his or her name behind it.
Well, because the feeling was we were looking for a lead donor who would give us a very large gift, and there was somebody that we thought would, we decided not to. So we could have aborted the whole project, but the feeling was that you would get smaller donors in cumulative way to provide the funding. It didn't come in as nearly as well as we expected it would. And I say we could have known that in advance. Well, that's an argument.
So if your logic isn't working, why do you continue to?
Well, no, but that was a project that was done and is over with. They're all through this, and for all the years I've been involved, there at the same time is constantly fundraising efforts where you're talking to people and explaining the mission of Cooper. You know, Bloomberg has been approached many times. You know, what I hear, and I don't know if this is true, that he made a comment that if you need money, charge tuition. Now, I don't know if he really said that.
Confirmed to me by the chairman of the board that he said in a phone conversation with the president, charge as much as you can. So
yes, in a meeting
but to be clear, I don't think I trust
president,
either the chairman or the president to make that pitch, and I assume that reception from Bloomberg precipitates from the fact that neither of them know how to sell a mission.
Well, that may be. I keep saying I'd like to get a hold of Bloomberg at commencement for 5 minutes and talk to him and make sure that that's not really his attitude, and that if it's presented properly, maybe we could get him interested.
But doesn't it concern you that the fact that the president and the chairman might have already botched that for us, when in fact, like, we could have avoided that whole thing had we had someone who was a proper leader for this school, or had any one of us spoken to him. I think I had this conversation again with John Shep the day that they charged tuition. I told him, I don't believe that you believe in the mission of the school, and I know that Mark does not, because I do believe that Mark believes in expansion, and I know that neither one of them can go into approaching a donor with genuine earnesty, like, about how like this is something to be held on to and not something to be given up on. My feeling is that
But that's an opinion.
It is an opinion, but it's an opinion based on my interactions with them and how they have expressed the mission to me and its significance.
But I know John Shedd is talking to several people who have significant capacity to give money, and he's trying very hard to get
But was he
them to
talking
make
about?
gifts.
But was he talking about? But was he
What do you mean?
asking?
I don't know. You keep
But
saying
money is-
expansion. What's
You're
That's
talking about
the
the
point he's
dorms,
been touting since the day he came into the school.
A global branding.
Yeah,
The brand is
That, I don't know where that global, I saw
He says
that
it.
comment.
And even thinking about
Nobody's talking about
renaming the
global
school an institute of something.
He talked
He might
about
have it with you.
Not on the
I know
board.
he might have his own personal agenda,
Dealing-
and that's
dealing
the
with-
problem.
dealing with-
He talks about something.
Dealing with John Shedd at a personal level, interacting with him as students, is kind of, it gives you the feeling of like the metaphor of, you know, how the body cannot move where the head won't go, you know? That's just what's going on, you know? We have a willing body, but a completely blind and unwilling head. And this is precisely what this action right here is trying to
Well, I think
address.
the problem is that I guess the majority of the board does not agree with that. And their perception of him is not what your perception is. And that doesn't necessarily mean the board is right, you're wrong.
With
It's
what
just a
frequency does the
difference.
board see Jamshed compared to how all of us, our collective interactions?
Because we see him as a very experienced, with a great track record, a great educator.
But you said not experiencing financial
Well,
hardship.
no, not in that fundraising. He's raised a lot of money this time. When I talk about financial management, it means cracking heads and cutting costs, which is a very different, and I gotta tell you, in academia, there aren't very many people who want to do that or who are good at doing that.
Again, the faculty here has said they would, at least in the School of Art. And the discussions have been cut off, not by them, but by the administration.
To go back to this issue of the charge that was made in August to the deans of the 3 schools, there's a difference between giving the faculty an opportunity to restructure and reimagine their program and charging them to come up with revenue-generating programs. Those are absolutely different things. One of the most elegant solutions, or like one of the most elegant questions that I heard to think about how we can reform the school is, what does a Cooper Union, it costs $40 million look like? It's not about, no, 40 million. Well, it's not about cost cutting so much. I mean, it's just
Reimagining the school at an all
yeah, it is
level.
reimagining the school,
Yes.
but it's asking the question in a different way. But it doesn't ask like what do we need to cut from this from this tree, from this body. It's saying like, how can we take a seed from what we have here and plant it
And it's not contingent on the threat of changing the mission.
And that's what our
Well, but
faculty
that's
wants.
And you're
very,
saying-
that's very valid, but that, and there are a lot of us who believe that that should be done at some point, if not now, because that gets you in line at least with your revenue, and you could run the school as a full scholarship school forever if you have those costs under control. The problem is that's a very, to implement that is a very dramatic change. You've
So
got
it's
tenured
charging
faculty.
tuition.
Well, it is, but tuition you can do unilaterally.
can do unilaterally.
Everybody hates it, but you can do it. If you want to reimagine a school, you have to get rid of existing faculty who are tenured.
But why do you always go there? Why do you always go to faculty? Why not go to administration? Why is our administration being paid so much when it has performed so poorly?
The administration you can get rid of, don't worry about that. If you wanted to start over,
But we're
you can start
asking-
over.
So that's what we're asking.
That's if you're changing and reimagining the school, and you need a whole different.
And that's exactly what the faculty said they wanted to do.
And they've
They
demonstrated.
wanted to work on, but you bamboozled them into doing the total opposite.
I think that the worst thing that can be done is to hear this question and assume that we already understand how the school works. I don't think you understand it. I don't think I understand how the school works. what needs to happen is a conversation with all the parties involved. There were faculty in the School of Art who were talking about this a few months back, and they said, and there was one person, one full-time faculty member that was asking the union rep, like, is it possible for me to renegotiate my contract as a part-timer? Like, how can we do that? How can we reimagine our health care plan? How can we do this? How can we do this? In the interest of keeping the school tuition-free. Like, I don't think that anyone, any individual in this room or in any room of the school can say, you know, we can't do this, that doesn't make sense. The most valuable thing that we could do is to, like, see my comments when we had a conversation.
Well, I have to tell you, a lot of these conversations have been held. You may not all be aware, but with a lot of people involved. I mean, this is not where we haven't talked about this stuff. I've been talking about some of the things you just mentioned for years and years and years, looking for ways, because this is not a new problem. This didn't occur 6 months ago. There's a lot of people, it occurred just recently, and that's another issue, that there was miscommunication a few years ago, which threw everybody off, and that was a big problem, very big problem, because it set perceptions up that were totally incorrect. And the problem's been around for 20 years.
But this is the first time I've ever heard a board member convey what happened as miscommunication. I've only ever heard board members say that the deficit was just happened, or it came from something else. You're the first. This is the first time I've ever heard someone call it a miscommunication, which is what it was, or a failure to communicate, whatever you want.
Well, the deficit wasn't miscommunication, but what was published about the status of the school a couple of years ago was a miscommunication at best. That's misleading. And
well, how long will it take for you to have that kind of frame of mind to deal with the issues that are happening right now? In other words, when will you stop defending what's going on, what this president is doing, and his failure at the moment? Which, yeah, I haven't seen him perform that well. Actually, he hasn't done anything.
Actually, on the task of assessing the president's performance.
Yeah,
it's tough because we don't. He has a set of responsibilities, so let's measure if he's doing his responsibilities. So I tried to do this, and the document that says what his responsibilities as president are, it's private. We have no access to it, so we can't even assess if he's doing his job.
That's exact. I just wanted to piggyback on that. That's just the simple question I have is, like, if you guys are in the midst of assessing, or you are the people who evaluate what the president is doing and if he's doing his job, I think that we also need access to a document outlining his responsibilities.
Yeah, that's private, right?
So
it's really between the board and the president.
But it's not, because he's running all of us, and he's running this institution.
Well, it's up to the board to figure out why his interactions with students, with faculty, as part of the judgment process.
So
that's the board's responsibility to understand that and to recognize that, and it's not so easy to do, I'll admit, because the board doesn't have very much interaction. So it's difficult. I understand what you're saying, and there's certainly a great depth of feeling, but the problem of evaluating Grusha now is that he has been totally immersed in this problem, and he really has nothing else that he can do, which is not fair to him either, because again, he didn't know coming in that this was the state of the financial situation.
But the board did.
But the board.
I'm sorry, but
the board did. Yes,
and
that's
so
true.
they hired accordingly.
You know, it sounds like Jamshid's doing his job perfectly, because his job is to be a patsy for the board.
No, he's doing a very limited amount of what he has to do, and that's unfortunate, but he's preoccupied with this current situation. Which is trying to figure out how we're going to survive financially. And that's where we spent the last 2 years, last year and a half, 2 years, debating all of the possibilities and all of the issues. And as I said, we came up with a solution that nobody is happy about.
But I think that's part of his job, is to come up with to be a part of that process in an effective manner. And I think, like, I don't feel that he's doing it. I think a lot of people don't feel that he's doing it. So I guess my question would be, when can a meeting happen in the board where you do get to sit down and say, okay, the students are unhappy, the faculty are unhappy, as you said, there is anger. Can that meeting happen so that he can be assessed, so that you, for the sake of your own peace of mind, and also to communicate that with us, like what that would look like?
Well, it's hard to separate his evaluation from the student's perspective with the level of anger that people feel about what's going on. You're saying you're being objective, and I understand that.
Faculty, alumni.
And I want to just clarify that to call this just an expression of anger would be a huge mistake. This is a group of, like a ton of smart people who are assessing the situation, and it's not just anger, it's us realizing that this is, like, the way we got into this mess is because the structure of governance for the school is completely broken, and we can recognize that the problem will never be fixed if that structure is still broken. So we believe that the people who made the mistakes should not have the privilege to try and fix their own mistakes.
And be held accountable.
Also, speaking of that structure, the structure that's set in motion at the moment is one in which you speak to us as customers rather than part of this patrimony, or actually a matriarchy, because the school started as a women's school. And the discourse that was developed through this school throughout the years actually is not, it wouldn't be what it is today if it wasn't for the people who came here. But so if you keep talking to us as consumers rather than like part of a patrimony, then you're speaking to us from the wrong position.
No, I
and you need
that.
to open that structure up so that we are part of the decision making. Otherwise, your mistakes will be made by you, analyzed by you, and tried to fix by you, and you will lose the Cooper Union as what it is. If you actually believe in the mission, you need to start believing in us as part of that.
Well, it's more than the mission. Don't misunderstand. I haven't heard anybody who disagrees that the fundamental strength of Cooper Union is the student body. And in my mind, the full scholarship has helped drive that over the years because it drives applications. Applications drive selectivity. When you drive selectivity, you get an excellent student body.
But you're speaking to us as consumers. You're missing the point. We're not consumers.
This is a student meeting, and I'm faculty, so I'll be brief. But I've been here since the 70s, so I have the...
I'm here longer than you.
Okay, we're both old.
Right.
But I would urge you to consider, when you speak about the president's experience, I think that's a fallacy. The two people who had more experience in the United States in international affairs, Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld, took us into wars with their experience. Sometimes we don't want that kind of experience. I don't think we want the president's experience where money is the answer. I think, let me just finish. Yeah. I think that these students here are presenting, they have their full scholarship, but they cannot in good conscience take their education and leave future generations behind. So this is one of the most moral groups of people.
Selfless.
And I also think that Cooper Union is unique. We know that. And if other schools, people want to put their names on buildings and labs, I think the alumni here will give money for a vision if we keep the integrity. If we have that bright, shining, concrete, undeniable vision that this school is free for all. And once you take that away, no building is going to get the money from the alumni. Matter of fact, the alumni are going to stop if the vision stops.
We had that vision for 100 years.
And it kept on going.
And when we built the building, the vision was still intact, and we did not get a tremendous outpouring of alumni.
This is about
the building to begin with, and the way you went about it, and getting a star architect, and all of this show business is not part of that vision. It is not part of that vision.
I just want to make one more comment, and then I'll stop. Barack Obama got elected president because people contributed $10 and $20. They didn't think that was possible. They thought they had to court the big donors, the multi-billionaires, to elect a president. It shows that small contributions, so if you're just looking for the big bucks, that also is not the right way.
20% of our alumni give money.
I think it has something to do with the people who are the faces of the institution.
This is 100. No, but for 100 years, through all kinds of presidents and boards, we have never got, and we don't understand it. We don't understand how people who get a free education, a wonderful education in a school with a mission to give all of its students a full scholarship can graduate and go on with their lives and not send $25. It's not the amount of money. I agree with you. It's the level of participation. We should have 85, 90% going by sending in $10. If they did that, I'd be very happy.
Can I help you understand that? Can I help you understand that? You have a room full of people who are willing to give up their degrees because we've been threatened to be taking our degrees away. In our education, $140,000 that this institution has invested in us, we're willing to give that, whatever proof of it, degree, to help the school. That is participation.
Absolutely.
And it might not be money, but it means that we are willing to give that money later when we graduate and we become...
If we can have the level of alumni interest and participation that I see in this room, we would be a hell of a lot better.
And you will if you follow our lead.
Well, and maybe this is going to change, and maybe the fact is that the attitude of the kids today in the last few years and going forward is very different, but there's a lot of kind of entitlement among alumni who felt, well, I got a free education, the school must have a lot of money. This is, I'm going back, I've talked to alumni from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and they just don't feel the school needs the money.
But the conversation
I didn't know what was going on. A lot of alumni, when we have sent our communications, say, I didn't know what the real situation was.
But you're talking about what's going on now.
Well,
I'm saying this has been a problem forever.
I think it's already changed. I think it's already changed. And a lot of this,
in what respect?
Because in the respect that we're here having this conversation with you.
Well, that's right.
We're in a different world right now. We're in a different frame of mind. And I respect, you're one of the people who's been here a long time. We lost 13 or 14 members of the board in the last years. We've lost all the big guys. You're one of the last trees standing. Listen, I respect that you've been with all sorts of people trying to raise money for the school for 100 years.
Not more than 90. No, seems like 100.
I didn't mean any disrespect. But just some levity. You know, I think that this moment in time, the urgency of the idea of a higher education that can be given to all people, that can be made available, that doesn't require oppressive debt, that is not sustained by the government. It's the last capitalist vision of a way to educate people. It is such a... This is the moment for this institution to lead. It's a different time than it was 10 years ago. And what we need, if we have the vision, and it's not just we like the mission, but we also want to get the new architect, and we're talking a coherent sense of what is the blood and bone of this place, and that were the vision at the highest levels, all the way down to the bottom. I don't think that we would be in the same position financially. It's not just alumni. There's people around the world who are interested in how can you provide education to people, and this school could be the one to lead the way. But we have to get a clarity of sight. We have to have you coming to the front. Mark Epstein is not the one that's going to bring the people from around the world who would get together to support this vision. We need people like you. We need people to stand up and realize this moment in time is different from the last one. It's different from even 3 years ago.
I agree completely. I agree completely. And the problem is we have not been successful doing that, and that doesn't mean we couldn't do it, but we have to not stop those efforts, because I agree completely that the idea of a free higher education, Cooper's a model that is unique in the world, and other people should be aspiring to what Cooper Union has been in higher education. So it's a matter of getting the story out, but I got to tell you how frustrating it is, because when you've been here so long and you feel all that, and you meet with people and they shrug. They don't get, now that doesn't mean you haven't hit the right people, because there are people out there who will respond. We haven't been able to find them.
What do we need to do to get you aboard, to get other people with you who have the same vision, people who would stand up and talk to us, people like you. Where do we find those people?
A lot of the board has the same thing. Not all of them. A lot of people are busy. They're in the middle of their career. They don't have time to really get into it. And that's a problem. It's very hard to recruit new people to the board, especially when you've got problems. Nobody wants to go on. A lot of people go on a board, you know, it's for prestige. They come to a few meetings, they have lunch, and they go home. And they don't really want to get into all the nitty-gritty and all the problems. It's hard to find people who are going to be dedicated enough to really put the energy and the effort into it. But we got to keep trying to do that. There are a lot of openings on the board. We are continuing to try to find the right people. We had always the conflict that there were some people who believe the board should be mostly alumni, because alumni understand the school, they have a feeling for it. Well, they don't have capacity themselves, they don't know a lot of people with money. We don't have a lot of wealthy graduates. Artists, architects don't make a lot of money for the most part. And the engineers, I used to say, are too smart. They go into research, they go into teaching, they're college professors. They don't make, usually we don't have guys who start companies. Bill Gates didn't go to Cooper Union, unfortunately. So it's a real issue, but you're absolutely right. We got to keep trying to do that.
That's why we need to also not just rethink what the school could be, but rethink what a board is. Like what you're telling me is how every other board works, and it's not a reason that Cooper's board needs to run like that. There's so much energy in this room, and there's so much energy at among the student body and alumni that we can incorporate that into how the school is run and into the board, and that's what we've been sort of asking for. And it's been.
We don't need the donations from the board. We need the leadership
and the involvement and the effort. I understand.
Not just the involvement and the effort. We need the vision. You know, if people see from around the world a new vision, that the leadership of the school isn't interested in multi-million-dollar flashy building that has nothing to do with the school, has nothing to do with this lineage, but is interested in sustaining the mission of higher education that is unique in the world, we will have people lined up to help us.
Well, what is the new vision? When you talk about a new vision, what do you mean by a new vision? Because to me, the old vision was pretty damn good. So, you know, I don't know what change you're talking about.
We're talking about Mark, we're talking about what Aaron just said about how we still have these archaic forms of governance and of board and administrative relationships with the community, and how we can really start to pioneer what a more cooperative form of governance would look like.
Well, that's a change in governance, not in vision.
It's both.
Because the governance right now doesn't have the vision. Trust us.
And that's because it's outdated, but I'm saying so it's good, but we can make it better. And we can make it better by bringing everyone in the room into the same page.
There's that, and also realizing there's a new context for the Cooper Union, and there's over $1 trillion of student debt, and that is a new thing. And I think
well, those are all the reasons why what Cooper's been doing for all these years is so wonderful.
Yeah, exactly.
And why it desperately should be retained if it could possibly be. And that's the frustration on the board, is that we haven't found a way to retain it. Nobody wants to get rid of the free tuition. To me, that's the one unique strength of Cooper Union. So, nobody went into this saying, well, let's just charge. We'll get some more money that way. But the problem is, when you don't have enough money, all this stuff, all the great talk is beneficial. It's good to have that. But at the end of the day, he's going to pay the light bill. And that's...
But I think what needs to be done is, let's bring this back full circle. We don't get donations. And people look at our school right now, and they see that there's a student body and its faculty that are trying to reach out to their leaders, and the leaders will not respond. And if there is a response, it's one of contempt and of laughter, and that communication is severed. And if I was an outside billionaire, I wouldn't give, because that's not a foundation that I think can be built upon. And we're here trying to act upon that, trying to make sure that this communication can be brought, so that people can look at our school and be like, wow, there's a vision, and there's a strength, and there's a clarity and a unity that I can build upon, and I can help build upon. And things that's not going to happen if we're still sitting here trying to get the guy that's 2 blocks down to talk to us. No one's gonna want to give to our school, and that's the issue.
I agree with what you say, but I also know that for all the years before, when there were none of these issues, we had the same problems in getting people excited about what Cooper Union is. Cooper Union has been what it's been for 100, 111 years.
But do you see the spike of interest that this type of campaign with the student and the faculty have garnered for the school? And also I think it's when you talk about how you maybe could have known about the decision of the building, but now it's not, it's a moot point to talk about it. I think it's the same thing with this. We're telling you that none of us are responsible for the fact that alumni didn't donate. We were not born yet. We're here now, and I'm an alumni next year.
Right.
This is my last week or so. Right. I'm telling you.
Well, that's the right focus. What do we do now to make it better.
And we're here telling you
Right.
that. So I'm asking you to disconnect this body from that body that we keep referring to that doesn't donate. We've been in close contact with them, many of them, hundreds of them even. And they seem to be on the same page with us. And I can't tell you, and I've told this to Mark, and I've told this to Jonathan, how many of them are not saying, I don't want to donate because people can afford to pay. They're saying, I don't want to donate because I don't see the clarity of vision of the board. I don't see that the board has the best interest of the students, and I don't see that they want to protect the mission and the vision of the school as far as the full tuition scholarship. And they don't believe that if the money is given, which they have to give, they say, we have money to give. We don't want to give it because we think it's going to get moved from this fund to that fund, and all of a sudden it's not going to be about the scholarship. There's no safe way for people to donate just to the tuition. Now, if you gave people a fund that they could donate to that would just go to people's tuition and not go to anything else, I guarantee you you'd have a ton of money. Faculty that are also alumni tried to set up a giant auction. They worked on it for a year and a half,
And the
only to get
administration stood in their way.
blindsided by Jomshed and told that they were not going to have clearance to have that auction go through. It would have easily brought in, they said, at least $16 million. Can you tell me why that would have happened? There's no explanation for that.
I don't know.
And you probably don't know about it. And again, I reiterate my point, just to be clear, you have to understand why there are reasons and who those stopgaps are that are preventing you from knowing the information that I'm knowing, that I've known, and that I've been trying to get to you. And you have to ask yourself who those people are.
And these are points
This is public knowledge.
These are points to evaluate the president upon. These are points to evaluate the administration and the governance system on.
Right. Well, it's clear that we need to do more as a board to understand what's going on in terms of relationships better than we understand it now. And I have to go back and think about how we're going to do that, because it's clear that there is clearly a level of misunderstanding here. Now, it's hard to do this unilaterally. You know, somehow or other you need to get the principals in the room and hear the arguments against and let people debate it through and understand, well, why did you do that? Well, here's why I did it, and see if it makes any sense. So it sounds like we need to do more of that.
So can you do that for us?
Well, I'm
going
to try.
Get the gears turning, like we're ready. Bring them over.
Listen, you asked what new vision I'm proposing. I'm not proposing a new vision. I'm proposing the same vision that Peter Cooper had about education being a human right and something that's transformative of society. All right, and I think that's the vision you have.
Well,
to
yes,
be honest.
but I'm saying we've had it all along.
No, but you've had it all along, and not all of them have had it all along. Mark Epstein doesn't have it now.
Well, he may have lost it because he's caught up in the problems
Right.
of finance.
But he's the one that's talking.
Well, but he's also responsible for getting the school on solid, stable financial footing. That's his responsibility.
He has no clue how to do it.
Well, that's another issue.
You don't get it on solid financial grounds by alienating yourself from the mission of the school, from the vision.
Perhaps the less volatile way of phrasing this is to say that to not keep division in your mind as the fundamental basis for which, like, finding solutions occurs, then you automatically cut out all of those other solutions that would be aligned with both the board's interests and faculty's interests and the students' interests in the institution.
Well, the question I'm struggling with is that if you've initiated tuition because we need to do that financially, at least for the short term, who knows how long, maybe it's forever, how do you then go out with the vision and the mission when you've got tuition now a reality? How do you deal with that?
It's not a reality, it's not reality.
I don't understand why tuition has been framed as, we have a short-term financial problem.
No, it's not, it's a long-term.
We have a long-term problem, but we have an immediate problem that's more severe. The Chrysler building gets refinanced in 5 years, it changes things.
That's true. Well, it makes it a little better.
The way it's been framed to us has always been, by the administration, by TC, a long-term problem and a short-term problem. And the short-term, that dialogue has been used to push forward with some urgency and immediacy, pretty much a tuition-based form. But tuition doesn't help the short term at all.
But it
so
kills
why?
doesn't kick
But it
in
kills
for
the
4
long
years.
term.
Exactly.
So it doesn't help the short term, and it kills the long term. Why do it?
No, because the tuition really,
It does kill the long-term.
The tuition is designed to solve the long-term problem, not the short-term problem.
How will it solve the long-term problem?
That's a debatable point, and you may be right. You may be right. We won't know, you know,
I think there's enough examples in the world of higher education that we do know that it is not a long-term solution.
And also, if one of the
Well, it may not be.
alumni and not having alumni donation, you're going to have even more of a problem with that in the future. And basically, by saying that we are going to charge tuition as a solution to a long-term problem, it means that you're totally disregarding and throwing away alumni's contributions.
Well, we're certainly taking the risk that we're going to lose alumni contribution. A lot of people believe you lose some, not all that much. I've spoken to a lot of alumni. A lot of them are very upset about what's going on. Some of them shrug and say, I got an email unsolicited yesterday from a guy who graduated a year before me, said, P.S., I think the tuition decision was the right one. I mean, it's not a universally felt point of view. I've got to tell you, a lot of people are really upset about it, but not everybody. So we will lose some alumni support, there's no question. We don't know how much until, well, I don't think most
I
of
just
it,
wonder
but
if
we'll
your
lose a lot.
evaluation of risk is worth relying on if you just outlined how in the past it hasn't been reliable because you, like everyone said, you made the problem, you evaluated the problem, you solved the problem, and how that is a closed loop when we're willing to come here and make it a more open and dynamic loop. And if you're telling me now that based on the risk you took there, that in this is like past few years you're ready to make another risk that's a bigger gamble, the gamble is not only the future generations that are going to possibly attend the school, but also the social capital that is attributed to my name when I'm going to be telling people that I went to this school during this time, then I have to tell you that I don't have any faith, I have no confidence in that decision. And I'm not saying that as though I'm trying to get rid of you, but I'm telling you.
No, I understand what you're saying.
It's not the small amount of alumni donations, it's the fact that it eliminates the possibility of placing the school at this moment in time, with higher education being a critical issue in the world, and particularly in this country, placing this institution as the focal point, as a vision that could be pushed forward by some force that we don't foresee at this time. If you sacrifice the vision, you eliminate that option. Right. Then you have a lot of problems to keep the thing from, it might go under anyway with tuition. I think it's very likely, and I wish you luck in trying to sustain it. But I would rather come with you and say, how can we work to change the governance, to send a new message to the world, say, we acknowledge our mistakes, this is not what we are about, and bring forward this school in a way that aligns the vision, aligns the community, aligns the administration, and pushes this thing forward.
Well, theoretically, I don't argue with that. The problem is, from a practical standpoint, I think what it would require is a change, fairly significant change to the school. And that
was the time.
Well,
that was the time.
Yeah, but there are a lot of people very nervous about doing that and the impact it'll have. Maybe it's less of an impact than the tuition is going to have. And that's the debate, and that's been the debate, as to which of these two things will be more painful for the institution to absorb. And it may well be that the other would have been, or would be less of an issue than tuition. A lot of people felt tuition was the lesser of the two evils.
No, tuition will cause pain over a long period of time.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt. We have a press conference in 10 minutes outside, but I wanted to, sure, you're welcome. It was at 6 outside, it's in 10 minutes, but I wanted to, Mike, to thank you for coming here, and I think everybody here appreciates this conversation.
Encourage your colleagues to come as well. That would be awesome.
And I will. If I could just maybe ask one last question, and it can be a short answer, and I intend no disrespect, but we all understand that the vote by the board to institute tuition at Cooper Union was fraught with a lot of was not unanimous.
That's right.
And I'm curious to know, did you vote to implement tuition at the school?
I can't answer that question.
Okay.
But I think you can figure it out.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Good luck. I hope things work out.
Thank you so much.
You came and you helped.
We would
now our spirits are lifted and we can follow.
We'd love for more of your colleagues to come here and talk to us.
He said no.
Oh, great, okay.